For decades, Bigfoot has been nothing more than a silhouette in the trees, a raw print in the mud, and a story swapped around campfires. Those images have a power of their own. They keep the mystery alive. But what if the most important clue to this creature's existence has been under our feet the whole time? Not in the shadow it casts, but in what it eats. Tonight, I promise something different. We will follow the trail of food. We will show you the strongest, most disturbing pieces of evidence that point to a real, living animal with a specific, repeatable diet. And we will explain why that truth has often been hidden, misdirected, or met with fear. This is no gentle folklore hour. This is an investigation into biological traces, corroborated witness accounts, and a web of documents and anomalies that together make a case too thick to ignore. Imagine a creature that brings itself into direct contact with people because of its food choices. Picture it wading in shallow streams during salmon runs, slipping into orchards at dawn to take whole branches of fruit, ripping open beehives for honey and brood, scavenging livestock at the edge of pastures, and rummaging through human refuse when it's convenient. In a handful of harrowing reports, imagine a scavenger that has been found at human remains. These are not random, sensational claims. They are patterns that explain odd wound patterns on game animals, inexplicable disappearances, and an ecological trace that doesn't match any known mammal. What I will lay out is clear. The strongest converging evidence, isotopic signatures, scat DNA, bite and drag marks, and repeated eyewitness testimony creates a picture of an opportunistic omnivore. That diet makes sightings cluster around specific seasons and places. Salmon runs berry thickets, orchards, apiaries, and farm edges. It explains why carcasses sometimes bear crushing, centrally focused damage rather than the slashes of a typical predator, and why people increasingly encounter something large and bipedal near campsites and roads. This narrative will show you three things. First, the primary components of that diet: the meat, fish, roots, fruits, bee products, small game, and human-associated foods that repeat across reports and samples. Second, the methods researchers use to find these clues: forensic isotope tests, DNA analysis of scat and hair, careful cataloging of wound patterns, and convergence of credible eyewitness accounts. Third, the concrete reasons this knowledge matters: public safety, wildlife management, and the integrity of the biological record. Finally, you'll see why institutions sometimes prefer silence. When an animal's feeding habits intersect with human economic interests, liability, and public fear, there is a strong incentive to downplay unusual findings. But the evidence has been accumulating in plain sight, and ignoring it risks both safety and truth. Stay with this through every block. The answer is stranger and more consequential than most admit. The trail we follow tonight is not smoke and rumor. It is a roadmap of what this animal eats, where it moves, and why that matters to all of us who live at the edge of the forest. To treat Bigfoot's diet as mere campfire chatter is to miss decades of careful, often quiet work. This question sits where folklore meets hard science, not speculation, but a body of inquiry carried out by credible people, field anthropologists who spent careers measuring and cataloging footprints, university biologists who took hair and scat to labs, and independent investigators who quietly compiled thousands of eyewitness statements from hunters, trappers, and indigenous trackers. Their names may not always make headlines, but their methods do. And those methods matter because the dietary question is a scientific one. It can be tested, measured, and either supported or refuted. Start with the tools. Modern forensic ecology gives us isotope chemistry that can read diet signals from hair and bone, macroscopic examination of stomach contents that can identify broken fish bones or tubers, DNA sequencing of scat that can pick up traces of a meal, and pathogen testing that can show exposure to animal or human-borne microbes. These are not mystical instruments. They are the same techniques used to study coyotes, wolves, and bears. When trained scientists apply them to anomalous samples, they produce data that demand attention. Skepticism is healthy and necessary. Mainstream biology has good reasons to doubt extraordinary claims. A large unknown primate in North America contradicts many baseline assumptions about population size, energy needs, and the odds of discovery in the satellite and camera age. Critics rightly demand strong evidence, but skepticism can also be blunted by a hidden assumption that any unknown animal must eat like a known one. That expectation blinds researchers to diets that are mixed, opportunistic, and seasonally shifting. A species that takes advantage of salmon runs, root tubers, berries, and human refuse will look ecologically different from a bear, wolf, or deer, and thus be easier to dismiss if investigators keep only familiar templates in mind. Institutional reluctance compounds the problem. Governments, wildlife agencies, and hunting organizations often have incentives to downplay unusual reports. Hunters fear market or trophy impacts. Landowners fear liability. Agencies worry about public panic and political fallout. As a result, records can be thin in public view. Independent researchers filing Freedom of Information requests have uncovered redacted memos, incident reports, ranger notes, and internal emails describing carcasses with odd damage patterns, damaged apiaries, and repeated unexplained losses near forest edges. Those documents rarely announce a discovery. Instead, they show consistent, careful observations that stop short of public disclosure, a pattern of recognition that something did not match known predators, followed by cautious silence. That silence matters until you add the human witnesses. Credible observers, experienced hunters, indigenous hunters who read the land for generations, wildlife biologists, forest workers, and long-term residents repeatedly describe similar behaviors. A large biped moving at the water's edge during spawning runs, an animal dragging a carcass into cover, methodical raids on hives and orchards. These are not anonymous sighting cards. Many come from people with solid ecological knowledge and track records of accurate identification. When their accounts converge across decades and regions, they create a picture that demands forensic cross-checking. Put these pieces together and the dietary question sits at an intersection. Forensic traces give suggestive, testable signals, and credible human observation supplies the ecological context needed to interpret them. Neither side alone is an open and shut case. Together they form a pattern that cannot be dismissed as mere lore. That pattern is why this inquiry matters and why, moving forward, it deserves the full weight of transparent science, careful documentation, and public scrutiny rather than institutional reticence. Before we state the central claim about what this creature actually eats, pause and consider several pieces of evidence that rarely make the headlines but appear again and again in detailed field notes, lab reports, and eyewitness logs. Taken together, they sharpen the mystery and frame the finding to come. Each line of data is imperfect on its own, subject to contamination, misidentification, or institutional reluctance, but their repetition across regions and investigators makes them worth taking seriously. First, isotopic anomalies. Stable isotope analysis is a simple idea. What an animal eats leaves a chemical fingerprint in its tissues. Independent laboratories that have tested hair, bone fragments, and other samples attributed to large unknown primates have reported carbon and nitrogen ratios that do not sit where you would expect for an exclusive browser. Some samples show a trophic level consistent with regular meat consumption, and, in certain coastal and riverine regions, a seasonal shift toward marine or freshwater signatures. In plain language, at times, these animals seem to be eating fish or other aquatic protein in ways that change the chemistry of their tissues. These isotope patterns don't consistently match local bears or known carnivores, suggesting a dietary profile that is different, if not unique. Second, scat DNA. Over the past 2 decades, more field teams have taken unidentified scat seriously and sent it to genetics labs. Repeatedly, analysts find mixed signatures, deer and elk DNA, salmon DNA where fish runs exist, and a broad array of plant DNA roots, berries, and tree fruits. In some samples, technicians also report traces of bee proteins. Contamination is a real concern in any of these studies, but the key point is repetition across time and space. Different teams working in different watersheds have turned up the same kinds of mixed animal and plant profiles. That pattern matches what you'd expect from a large omnivore that switches resources seasonally. Third, tooth and jaw anomalies. When carcasses are examined after unexplained losses, the bite marks and bone damage sometimes tell a story that does not fit the usual suspects. Instead of the slicing incisions of a canine predator, investigators have documented wide, compressive impressions and broad crushing on ribs and pelvis bones. Trees stripped of bark and wooden objects show scraping and gouging inconsistent with ursine tooth patterns. In a few cases, fragments of crushed bone rather than cleanly cut elements were recovered, a sign of powerful mastication, an animal processing both meat and fibrous plant materials. Those marks suggest a jaw built for crushing rather than tearing, and they appear repeatedly enough to raise questions. Fourth, direct eyewitness behavior. Credible witnesses, hunters, professional anglers, indigenous trackers, and forestry workers describe the same kinds of actions in the field. A large biped standing in shallow water, patient and deliberate, scooping or grasping salmon. A dusk sighting of a heavy figure dragging a partially eaten deer into dense cover. Repeated raids on beehives where comb is opened and honey removed. These accounts are not isolated anecdotes. They cluster around resource pulses, salmon runs, berry seasons, and late fall root digs. The behaviors observed: fishing with hand-like motions, dragging large carcasses. Precise hive raids are what you would predict from an intelligent omnivore exploiting high-value, seasonal food sources. Fifth, institutional and private logs. Logs from logging companies, county incident reports, and private landowner records often tell the same quiet story: repeated unexplained losses at forest edges. carcasses found with odd damage patterns, damaged apiaries, and animals seen near orchards and livestock pens. When independent researchers have filed Freedom of Information requests, some returned documents show ranger notes and internal emails describing these events in plain terms. Frequently, the public-facing record ends with a closed file or a vague notation. That consistency, detailed observation, followed by muted disclosure creates a pattern of recognition and restraint that is difficult to ignore. Individually, each of these lines of evidence has caveats. Lab contamination can produce false signals. Eyewitness memory can be faulty. Institutional silence can reflect bureaucratic caution rather than conspiracy. But when isotopic chemistry, genetic traces in scat, biomechanical marks on bones and wood, repeatable eyewitness behavior, and consistent administrative notes all point in a similar direction, they do more than hint. They form a coherent set of anomalies. Those anomalies prepare us for an uncomfortable but unavoidable possibility. The creature in question does not fit neatly into existing dietary categories. Its feeding ecology appears ecologically adaptable, seasonally driven, and unusually tied to both wild and human-provided resources. What follows will lay out the central revelation that binds these pieces together, a revelation built on the very patterns we have just examined. Here is the central revelation. The strongest, most consistent body of evidence points to Bigfoot as an opportunistic omnivore, not a simple herbivore, not a classic apex predator, but a large, intelligent forager whose diet is built from repeatable, seasonal elements. Put bluntly, what this creature eats explains where it appears, when it appears, and why its signs look different from those of known predators. The pattern is clear across independent lines of inquiry, isotopes and tissue chemistry, genetic traces in scat, bite, and wear patterns on bones and wood, and convergent eyewitness testimony. Together, they form a coherent dietary profile. First, large ungulate meat. Hunters and field researchers have repeatedly found deer and elk carcasses with damage that does not match common predators. The wounds often concentrate in the midline and chest rather than cleanly cutting and stripping like a wolf or a mountain lion. Bones are crushed and gnawed in ways suggesting heavy mastication, and drag marks indicate a biped pulling a large carcass into dense cover. In several sites, hair and bone assemblages tested for DNA contained ungulate sequences alongside hair that did not match any known local mammal. These traces are consistent with active predation in some cases and systematic scavenging in others. A large animal taking advantage of high-calorie resources when available. Second, fish and seasonal runs. In salmon country, eyewitness accounts clustered tightly around spawning seasons. Observers describe a patient, deliberate fishing style, wading into riffles, using broad hands to scoop or seize fish, and moving multiple catches back to the tree line. Isotopic analyses on bone and hair fragments from supposed Bigfoot samples show seasonal marine or freshwater signals in certain regions. The chemical fingerprint of repeated fish consumption. That seasonal marine signal is one reason sightings spike near rivers and estuaries at predictable times of year. Third, tubers and roots. Scattered reports and physical evidence show systematic digging and gouging where roots and tubers grow. Freshly turned soil, uprooted starchy plants, and gouged stumps point to powerful forelimbs adapted to excavation. Root foods provide dense carbohydrates and calories when meat is scarce, and their presence in scat and field notes explains why some populations of this creature remain active in winter or late fall, following a resource calendar that differs from many carnivores. Fourth, fruits, berries, and sap. Damage to berry patches, orchards, and fruit trees recurs in areas that also report sightings. Bigfoot appears to exploit dense fruiting areas, often at night, and to take large quantities in short bursts. Beekeepers, too, report precise hive raids, honeycombs removed, frames stripped, and combs carried away in a way that suggests dexterity and an understanding of where the most reward lies. Bee products and tree sap show up in scat DNA alongside plant matter, reinforcing the picture of a broad, opportunistic diet. Fifth, small animals and eggs. Scat analyzes and some witnesses point to opportunistic takes. Small mammals, bird eggs, amphibians, and other easily captured protein sources. These additions are the kind of flexible diet components you would expect from a smart omnivore that uses every available calorie source. Finally, and perhaps most consequential, human-associated foods and refuse. Increasingly, evidence links encounters to places where human food is accessible. Accounts describe raids on barns, unsecured feed stores, campsites with open coolers, and roadside trash. Field notes and a small set of recovered samples include human processed materials, wrappers, cans, and other debris in the same context as hair or scat attributed to the creature. This behavior explains the growing number of sightings near roads, camps, and settlement edges. The animal follows calories where it finds them. Taken together, these dietary elements explain several otherwise puzzling observations. Seasonal spikes in sightings align with resource pulses, salmon runs, berry peaks, tuber availability, giving a predictable ecology to many encounters. The odd damage patterns on carcasses and trees match a mouth and set of forelimbs built for crushing, digging, and dexterous manipulation rather than the shearing bites of a big cat. The presence of human foods in some samples clarifies why some populations have become bolder and why conflicts cluster around human infrastructure. There is a darker implication to rare but credible field notes reference scavenging on human remains in isolated incidents. While these reports are uncommon and legally and ethically fraught, they fit the model of an opportunistic omnivore, a large animal capable of taking advantage of any calorie source, including carcasses. Those instances raise real forensic and public safety questions that cannot be ignored. This revelation is not a single smoking gun but a mosaic assembled from many small, reproducible pieces. Isotope chemistry sets the trophic level. Scat DNA reveals mixed animal and plant sequences. Bite marks and bone breakage show heavy crushing consistent with mastication of both meat and fibrous plants. Eyewitnesses across regions describe the same behaviors: fishing at runs, digging for roots, raiding hives and orchards, and removing human food. Institutional logs and private records, when available, corroborate patterns of repeated losses and strange damage that do not conform to known predators. Understanding this diet matters. It reframes the creature not as a myth that occasionally wanders near humans, but as a forager whose feeding choices bring it into predictable conflict and whose ecological role is complex and seasonally dynamic. What it eats explains where it lives, how it moves, and why it remains elusive to conventional survey methods. Knowing this, we can anticipate behavior, target scientific inquiry where the food is, and take practical steps to reduce conflict measures that we will outline next. If the diet is the best clue we have, then the answer is not gladiatorial proof but management and method. Knowing that this creature follows calories, salmon runs, berry flushes, tuber patches, hives, and human refuse changes the problem from catch the animal to stop feeding it and start documenting it properly. The dietary revelation carries three urgent responsibilities: protect people and livestock, protect whatever population might exist, and protect the integrity of the evidence so science can do its job. First, stop habituation. The most dangerous bad idea is to let a large, intelligent animal learn that human infrastructure equals food. Habituation happens slowly. A single, unsecured garbage bag, an unattended compost heap, a feed store door left open, or fruit dropping beneath an orchard tree will teach a forager to return. Reduce that learning. Use wildlife-proof trash containers. Lock feed and grain in metal trailers or sheds. Pick fruit promptly and collect windfalls. Secure beehives behind sturdy fences and use hive enclosures where practical. If you run a campsite, never leave coolers or food unattended. Use bear lockers or hang food on cables away from sleeping areas. These are simple steps that drastically reduce repeated interactions. Second, prioritize non-lethal conflict reduction. If an animal is drawn by easy calories, remove the calories and use deterrents before reaching for lethal measures. Night corrals for livestock, temporary electric fencing during high-risk seasons, motion-activated lights, and auditory alarms have all reduced losses from habituated predators in other contexts. Rotate dogs in human presence where feasible. When dealing with apiaries, place hives in fenced clusters, elevate them, and use smoke screens or deterrent scents if recommended by local experts. Lethal removal without clear, documented evidence risks destroying the very population we ought to study and protect, and it risks legal and cultural blowback. Treat killing as a last resort, under scientific oversight and legal authority. Third, adopt rigorous evidence protocols. Too many promising leads die in poor handling. Hair stuffed into a paper towel, scat left to bake in the sun, photos without scale or coordinates. If you find hair, scat, a carcass, or other potential evidence, follow a checklist. Photograph everything with timestamps and a visible scale. Take wide shots and close-ups. Record GPS coordinates and environmental notes. Wear disposable gloves and masks to avoid contamination. For hair, collect several samples using clean forceps and place each in sealed paper envelopes labeled with date, time, and location. For scat, use sterile swabs and double-bag samples with clear labels. If you open a carcass, document before touching, photograph all wounds, and where possible leave tissue for veterinary or forensic analysis. Ship duplicate samples to at least 2 accredited, independent labs and request blind testing and full methods disclosure. Preserve a documented chain of custody, log who handled what, when, and how. Send copies of your documentation to a trusted third party, an independent researcher, university lab, or local journalist to establish a public record. Fourth, demand transparency and coordinated oversight, where records have been redacted or incidents quietly closed. Coordinated FOIA requests and investigative journalism can force disclosure. Engage local elected officials and tribal authorities. These issues cross jurisdictions and cultural lines. When agencies respond, insist on simultaneous public release of non-sensitive data that matters for safety and science. Locations of verified damage with private details redacted, sample analysis reports, and internal incident logs. Transparency reduces rumor, prevents unnecessary culling, and allows scientists to map patterns without political interference. Fifth, build a targeted, seasonal research strategy. If the animal follows salmon, berry, and tuber availability, then so should investigators. Deploy camera traps and hair snares at known salmon runs during spawning season, at berry patches during ripening, and at root digging sites in late fall. Standardize how you document hive and orchard damage. Photos with scale, descriptions of entry points, and notes on any human food found nearby. Coordinate sampling windows across regions to compare isotopic and DNA data seasonally. Add pathogen screening to sample protocols. If this is a long-lived mammal shifting between wild food and human refuse, there are public health implications worth tracking. Sixth, include indigenous communities and local knowledge. Indigenous hunters and elders have long observed seasonal patterns and carry critical ecological context. Work with tribal governments on protocols for evidence handling, research priorities, and cultural sensitivities. Their consent and partnership will improve both the science and ethics of any program. Finally, change public reporting protocols. When citizens call agencies, they should receive clear, practical instructions on securing scenes and preserving samples. Agencies should offer rapid response or rapid advisory help. Even just an evidence checklist and a recommended lab list reduces lost opportunities. Publish results rapidly and openly when samples are analyzed. Simultaneous release to the public and scientific partners reduces the chance of suppression and builds trust. This is not a call to panic, it is a call to discipline. If we stop feeding the animal, document what we find carefully, pressure agencies for transparency, and target research by season and resource, we will reduce conflict and produce the evidence needed to settle the question. The forest has been giving us a map in calories and carcasses and combs. Follow it with care, protect people and animals, and demand that the truth be handled like the serious biological question it is. This is the part where knowledge becomes action. The dietary picture we've built so far is useful only if people on the ground change everyday behavior. Preserve evidence correctly and force institutions to treat those traces as serious data. Below are practical, proven steps you can take now, whether you live at a cabin, run an apiary, own orchards, hunt, fish, or simply walk the woods. Do them reliably and you reduce danger, protect animals, and create the high-quality samples science needs. 1. Secure a stance. Start with the obvious. Food is a map to meetings with large animals. Store household garbage in sealed, wildlife-rated containers. If your area uses municipal bins, keep them in a locked shed or garage until collection day. Use baristas and dumpsters where available. Lock all livestock feed, grain, and seed in metal containers or locked outbuildings. Pick ripe fruit promptly and gather fallen fruit daily. Fallen fruit is a nightly invitation. Keep coolers, ice chests, and cooking gear locked or hung high when camping. Compost only in wildlife-proof tumblers or sealed bins. Never leave open piles. In short, remove easy calories. To protect livestock, nighttime is when conflicts concentrate. Use night corrals with solid walls to block access and the view. Animals that can't see or smell a predictable food source are less likely to try motion-activated lighting, and loud alarms discourage repeated visits. Temporary electric net fencing, properly installed and set to wildlife-safe voltages, is effective for perimeter control around pastures and apiaries during high-risk windows, salmon runs, peak berry season, and late fall tuber digging. Do not leave carcasses, but if an animal dies, follow local agency guidance. Bury deeply, burn where permitted, or use secured disposal to avoid attracting scavengers. 3. Document encounters properly. If you find tracks, hair, scat, damaged hives, or a suspicious carcass, treat the scene like a crime scene. Photograph everything before you touch it. Take wide shots that show context, mid-range shots, and close-ups with a scale, a ruler, a tape measure, or a coin. Record GPS coordinates with your phone or a handheld GPS and save the time-stamped images. Note weather, light, wind direction, estimated time since the event, and the names of any witnesses. Avoid confronting or trying to drive the animal away. Distance preserves safety and evidence. 4. Collect evidence safely and cleanly. If you can do so without risking your safety, put on disposable gloves before handling anything. For hair, use clean tape, strips, or envelope the sample in paper. Not plastic. Moisture causes mold. For scat, sterile swabs are best. Swab the interior if you can. Place swabs in sterile tubes, and freeze or place in ethanol if available. If you cannot freeze, put samples in a cool, dark place and ship them promptly. For tracks, place a scale in the photo and, if you know how to cast prints without contamination, make a plaster cast. Otherwise, photograph thoroughly and preserve the surrounding area. Label all samples with date, time, GPS, what the sample likely is, and who collected it. 5. Preserve chain of custody. Evidence loses value when its history is murky. Email a copy of your photos and notes to yourself with a timestamp and to a trusted third party. Make photocopies of any forms or labels. When mailing physical samples to labs or researchers, use traceable shipping, keep receipts, and record tracking numbers. If you hand samples to an agency or researcher, get a signed receipt specifying what was turned over and when. Publicly posting an initial dataset photos with timestamps and location to a community repository or local press creates a visible record that is hard to quietly erase. 6. Send duplicates for independent testing. Whenever possible, split samples and send portions to at least 2 independent, reputable laboratories and, if available, a university partner willing to run blind controls. Independent replication is the single best defense against contamination, fraud, or institutional suppression. Choose labs with published methods and chain of custody procedures. Keep small reference samples for yourself in case of dispute. 7. Engage local experts and communities. Contact your state wildlife agency, a university biology or wildlife department, or independent researchers who specialize in large mammals and forensic DNA. Ask for guidance on evidence handling and request assistance with sample submission. Work with tribal governments and indigenous hunters. Their ecological knowledge is crucial and their consent matters. Organize community watch groups for high-risk periods and distribute practical guidelines so neighbors follow the same protocols. 8. Report and pressure for transparency. If you find redacted or closed reports, file Freedom of Information requests and follow up persistently. Contact local investigative reporters and provide them with your documentation and copies of any FUJAR returns. Public scrutiny changes incentives. Agencies that expect public attention are less likely to quietly destroy or reclassify inconvenient records. Encourage agencies to release lab results publicly and simultaneously to scientific partners. Safety first. Never try to capture, corner, or confront a large unknown animal. Keep children and pets indoors during peak activity hours if you know activity is nearby. If you encounter a large biped, maintain distance, do not run, and retreat slowly to a safe location while calling authorities. These steps are not a panicked scramble, they are discipline. They are the routine practices that turn anecdote into evidence and reduce the chance of escalation. If more people secure attractants, protect livestock, document with care, and demand independent analysis, the number of dangerous habituation events will fall and the scientific record will improve dramatically. In short, don't feed the animal, don't let it feed on us, and make sure every scrap of evidence survives long enough to be examined. The next sample you preserve properly could be the one that changes everything. The evidence we've walked through leaves a single, urgent picture. This is not just folklore. Isotopic oddities in hair and bone, DNA from scat that mixes deer and salmon with berries and bee proteins, consistent witness accounts across decades, and repeated patterns of damage around orchards, apiaries, and river runs all point to the same ecological portrait, a large, intelligent omnivore that takes advantage of both wild and human-linked foods. That truth changes everything. It explains why sightings cluster at certain times of year, why carcasses sometimes show crushing rather than slicing, and why encounters increasingly happen at the edges of our campsites and towns. Understanding diet is not an academic luxury. What an animal eats determines where it travels, when it moves, and how close it will come to people and livestock. If the creature follows salmon, runs, roots, and berry flushes, then so will observers who track those resources. If it will eat unsecured feed, trash, or fruit, then humans are creating predictable attractants. That predictability is the key to both reducing danger and collecting real data. The science and the safety measures are two sides of the same coin. So what must change now? First, behavior. Communities living near wild country should treat attractants as the most immediate and solvable risk. Secure garbage in certified wildlife containers. Lock feed and grain in buildings that wildlife cannot breach. Remove fallen fruit, secure compost, and never leave coolers or food unattended at campsites. Night corrals, motion lights, and temporary electric fencing during high-risk windows, salmon runs. Berry season and late fall lower the chances of habituation. Habituation is the enemy. An animal that learns humans equal food will lose fear quickly, and that is how dangerous interactions begin. Second, Evidence protocols. Too many promising leads stall because samples were handled poorly or disappeared into an institutional black box. If you find hair, scat, or an unusual carcass, document everything. Time-stamped photos, GPS coordinates, and clear notes on weather and visibility. Use gloves and sterile containers. Send duplicates to more than one reputable lab. Share results publicly and simultaneously. That transparency builds trust and makes it harder for evidence to be quietly suppressed or misinterpreted. Third, insist on agency transparency and independent oversight. Redacted incident logs, vague closure memos, and unreturned internal inquiries breed suspicion and hinder science. File FOIA requests, work with local journalists, and seek university partnerships. When agencies know their actions will be scrutinized, the incentive to hide inconvenient data drops. Public disclosure protects communities from secret culling and preserves the biological record for future study. Fourth, favor non-lethal science-first management. If this animal is confirmed and rare, the ethical and ecological priority should be to reduce conflict without destroying a population we don't yet understand. Electric fencing, secure corrals, deterrence, and community education must come before lethal measures. Lethal action, when it occurs, should be guided by independent scientific counsel, legal process, and careful documentation. Fifth, coordinate research seasonally and specifically. Camera traps at known salmon bends during spawning, hair snares in berry thickets, standardized surveys of root-digging sites, and forensic cataloging of beehive damage will produce the strongest test of the dietary model. Blind DNA analyzes isotopic baselines for local prey species, and cross-region comparisons are the methods that can turn anecdote into replicable science. Finally, build community capacity. Train neighbors how to secure attractants and preserve evidence. Organize watch groups in high-risk months. Engage tribal governments and indigenous hunters. Their ecological knowledge is essential and must be respected. Create clear public reporting channels so citizens know how to act safely and how to hand evidence to specialists without contaminating it. All of this rests on a single moral choice. Will we treat this as a problem to be hidden or as evidence to be followed? The forest has been feeding something in the dark for generations. That something has left a trail in isotopes, in scat, in broken hives, and fished river bends. Those traces are not random. They are readable. They tell us where to look and how to act. They also tell us that what we do next matters not just for human safety, but for the integrity of a potential discovery. If you walk these woods, respect the food line. If you find evidence, preserve the chain of custody. If you care about truth, demand transparency and support systematic science. The most important clue to this creature's existence has been its diet. Follow that clue with discipline, not gossip. Do that, and the mystery will stop being merely a story and start being a problem we can solve together for safety, for knowledge, and for whatever lives quietly among the trees. We close this investigation not with triumph, but with a plan practical, immediate, and built to survive the kinds of secrecy and confusion that have kept this question stalled for decades. The diet evidence has given us a map. Block 8 is how to use it. Real-world examples, reproducible protocols, and a community-first strategy that protects people while preserving the integrity of any biological discovery. Start with 2 short anonymized case sketches that show how the diet clue becomes actionable. In a coastal valley, repeated reports of nighttime river visits matched the salmon run. Locals complained of missing fish and fresh, deep drag marks on riverbanks. A coordinated effort camera traps at known bends, hair snares on likely travel corridors, and a neighborhood timeline of harvested fish produced time-stamped photos of a large biped using a shallow riffle. Samples collected with gloves and sterile bags were sent to 2 independent labs. The result? Converging data that correlated isotopic signatures in a hair sample with heavy seasonal fish consumption. The second sketch, an orchard community plagued by stolen fruit and damaged hives, adopted a simple protocol: remove fallen fruit nightly, install motion lights, and set standardized hive damage logs. When a damaged hive was photographed and sampled, the documentation and prompt submission of comb fragments to a university lab allowed rapid, blinded analysis that revealed unusual proteins consistent with an omnivorous breaker of combs, not a small mammal. Those sketches point to an approach anyone can replicate. Document, secure, sample, and share. Document with time-stamped photos and GPS. Record witness statements immediately, and treat each datum as part of a chain that will stand up to independent